going to have a lively conversation about women in politics. Is there any better? Well, I like to say women are the life of the party, and we've got 6 wonderful women up here, all involved in Minnesota politics, who are going to tell you the hows, whys, and whats about how to be involved and how to have a good time while you're doing it. This group is really fun. First off, I'm going to start with our elected officials, and I'll start by seniority. Cindy Pugh represents the area of Lake Minnetonka, and I believe Chanhassen is your home, though, right? Chanhassen. She's been in the state legislature for now three terms, and which is 6 years for those of us who are normal people. And we'll give her a chance to say how and why she ran. But next to her is one of our freshman Republican women, and her name is Ann New, and she's from a little bit north, up in North Branch. Yes. North Branch. I got the 2 hardest ones done. We have a state senator who's going to be joining us as well, but she is stuck in traffic, so stay tuned for her. Starting here on my far left, I'm going to start with Patty Meyer. Patty is the 3rd district, and it's 3rd district day here at the Republican booth, 3rd district Republican chair. And I just have to say this because I'm so proud of Patty. She's the only woman Republican chair right now, so we need more of you to run. Amen, sister. Next to her is Rachel Aplikowski, and there's a wonderful handout if you bought some merchandise here that tells you all of the great things that Republicans accomplished this year at the legislature. This is probably the woman who wrote it. Rachel is Director of Communications in the Senate Executive Assistant in the Senate Republican Caucus. Next to her is Janet Behofer. Janet is the Republican National Committee woman from Minnesota, just fresh off the RNC meeting last week in Nashville, so I'm sure you'll have some interesting stuff to add about that. And last but certainly not least is head of the Minnesota Republican Women, Pam Myra, who hails from Burnsville. And that is the statewide Republican organization that any woman in the state can join who just wants to learn and be involved in Republican politics. So let's give them all a warm welcome. And I'm going to start with Ann, because the question I always get asked is, how or why did you get involved in politics?
That's a loaded question. I've been involved in politics really since my oldest son, who just turned 18, was born. I've just been active in the party. It was something I believed strongly in. And through that involvement, I started out just exclusively doing grassroots kinds of things and party things. And over the years, really in 2010, I transitioned to some campaign work. Worked in politics until 2016, and the opportunity arose to run for office. So I did.
Was it a good decision?
Absolutely.
How many people are in your legislative district? How many constituents in the area you serve?
Each district has, what, about 35,000 people for House districts.
Okay. So they all have to call you when they want an answer about what's going on at the Capitol? Is that how it works?
Yes, thankfully we have a great deal of support.
So you have 1 representative and 1 state senator for everybody in the state.
Correct.
Let's go on to Cindy. Cindy, what made you get involved in politics?
Well, my story is a little bit different than my colleague Ann's. I attended my first caucus in 2008, which really wasn't that long ago. And before that, all I did was vote. And
which is very important.
Yes, oh, absolutely. And when the redistricting occurred in 2012, my phone literally started ringing off the hook. I had co-founded Southwest Metro Tea Party, and so I was an activist at that time working to save our nation. That was really my focus. And the calls kept coming for me to challenge a 22-year incumbent. And I said no repeatedly, but when I took a look at his voting record, I decided that somebody needed to challenge him. And so I said, yes, I will find somebody to challenge him. And so that didn't happen. I looked and looked, and I couldn't find anybody. And I remember the day like it was yesterday when I said to my husband, honey, I think I need to step up. And so that's what I did, and I ran, and then we had a primary, and I was successful. And so the rest is kind of history. I feel like it was a calling that I answered the call.
I think it often is. I think it often is. I have to tip my hat to you because what you did was very, very brave. It's very hard to get women to step up and file for office and run. We're always the backroom people, and when a vacancy occurs, to have women who step up to that opportunity, I tip my hat to you, because it's a major endeavor, and plus with small children, it's even more challenging for some. Patty, what got you involved in politics?
When I first got involved in politics was like many of you out there. I decided to go to a call center and make some phone calls. And this was back with George Bush. And somebody spotted me there, and next thing you know, I got a phone call, and they asked me, well, would you like to be secretary at our convention? I said, okay, I wanted to get involved. Next thing I know, they asked if I would like to be on the executive committee, and I said yes. Next thing I know, I'm the co-chair of one of the Senate districts. Then we faced redistricting, and I became chair of the new district. And like you were talking about running, we were faced with a candidate on the B side of our district, and nobody would step up. And I said, I am not going to let him win without a challenge. So I said, I'm going to go out and do it. I was not successful, but it was an experience well worth it, and I wasn't going to hand it to him on a silver platter by any means. And just recently, I decided to take over CD3, and it's been a great experience, and I'm looking forward to doing a lot more with CD3.
Bless your heart, bless your heart. Tell me what your candidate experience was like as a non-winner. I can relate to that a little bit. I thought I wouldn't bring this up, but I will. 3 weeks ago today, we were having the grand reopening of the Capitol, and I was on a panel with the Lieutenant Governor. Some of you may know I ran for Lieutenant Governor in 2010 and was not successful. But she gave me the most gracious introduction and said, were it not for 2,500 votes, she would be up here and she would be introducing me and I would be sitting on the panel. And I said afterwards, thank you so much for that gracious introduction. That sounds so much better than loser. But it's a rough experience. Did you have a good time?
I had a great time. I mean, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the people in the neighborhoods, and most people were very receptive. I have to say that when I came out of there, in Plymouth, I won every precinct. I won Woodland. I won a couple of Minnetonka. And even in the parts of Minnetonka that were rough, I ended up bringing in more votes than my predecessor did.
Wow.
So I thought, okay, we're just moving the ball down the court, so the next person, we're gaining every time. So I think we'll get to turn that red.
So I think when Patty runs again, she will be successful. How's that? Rachel, what got you involved? You've been a party activist for a number of years. You're married to a party activist.
Yep.
Your mother-in-law is a party activist. Yep. I think there's something in the water out there.
Yes, there must be. Well, I'm actually the only one in my side of the family that's involved in politics. And what happened, my story is that I was a freshman in college up at Concordia College in Moorhead when the September 11th attacks happened. I was in school to be an English teacher. I enjoyed my civics classes, did really well in them, but had no intention of pursuing a career in politics until that day. And I wouldn't recommend this. I actually went online and read the party platform to determine if I was a Republican or a Democrat, because I didn't know. No one in my family had been involved. My mom voted for Bill Clinton, but she also voted for Bush. So we were a typical suburban family, split ticket voters, just kind of vote for the guy you like. And I decided I was a Republican and got involved. I interned in the White House during my last semester of college, right at the beginning of Bush's second term. Kind of got bit by the bug there. And then just went on. I worked here at the state party in 2005 and 2006. In 2008, I joined Michelle Bachmann's congressional office, and I was doing casework kind of part-time, and they asked me to come on board full-time to do communications. I did that for about 5 years. Then I joined Tom Emmer's campaign when she retired, worked for him for 2 years, and most recently I'm with the Minnesota Senate as the executive assistant. And I manage a bunch of people who are kind of in my situation. It's their first job. Entry level, a lot of them right out of college, so it's really rewarding for me to have it come full circle.
That is an amazing story. Starting as recently as 2011. That is an amazing story. Well, here is someone who has really risen to the upper echelons of the National Republican Party. Janet Beehopper is our Minnesota representative on the Republican National Committee. How'd you get involved, Janet? I know your background was in education, higher ed.
Well, I retired from IBM, and I teach a college at Metro State now, so you can tell your friends that you have finally met a Republican adjunct professor at a public university.
Awesome, awesome.
I got involved, my first caucus was 2002. We went to a Christmas party for former Congressman Klein. I signed the sheet that you sign everywhere you go when you do Republicans, and then nobody called. I'm not known for being shy and retiring, so I called the campaign office and I said, guys, I'm willing to help. I said, you haven't called. So they called back later and they said, well, you agreed to help, but all you agreed to do was stuff envelopes, and we don't do that till October. And I said, because I really didn't think of myself as outgoing. Well, that part of me came out, and I went into the office and I said, do you have any projects that I could run? I mean, I'm coming out of the private sector. I want a project, okay? And she says, what do you know about election law? And I said, nothing. It can't be too bad. That is an understatement for Minnesota election law. And so if you ever want to do anything to help the cause, go sign up to be an election judge. So what happened over a period of 8 years, starting in 2004, I literally started from scratch a process to sign up Republicans for challengers, election judges, and then attorneys by 2010. And we had never done that in any documentation before. It was statewide. And then when the RNC position came open in 2012, I had a base across the state. They said, Janet, you've got to run. I ran. I love it. It is a wonderful group of people, and I just got reelected last year for a second term.
Congratulations. We're lucky to have you. I'll get back to what you do in just a second, but I want to give Pam an opportunity. Pam is president of a statewide women's organization. Tell us a little bit about your background, because before that, you were in the legislature.
That's right. My husband and I first went to our first precinct caucus in '94 because we had kindergarten children and we were quite worried about the education system here in Minnesota. And so we had always voted, or I should say I had always voted Republican.
You're outing your husband here today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, we loved the precinct caucus. We volunteered when the elections came up. But in 2008, in July, I woke up in the middle of the night with a horrible nightmare. And it was that candidate Obama had won the election, government took over our health care, and cancer patients were denied treatment. And it was such a vivid, horrible dream. First thing I did the following morning was to call the Republican Party of Minnesota and say, what can I do? How can I help? My father had cancer at the time, and that dream was so vivid. From there, I helped with the presidential campaign, and then decided to run for chair of my House district and won. And then was the opportunity to run for state representative. The current legislator had won with 56% of the vote. There was a third-party candidate, a conservative, but I did a lot of door knocking and won. And so I served 2 terms in the legislature. I ran with Marty Seifert for lieutenant governor, and then it was in last year that the opportunity to be leader, president of the Minnesota Federation of Republican Women, kind of fell in my lap. The previous president resigned, and so I've been working on that and enjoying it very much.
Been doing a terrific job.
Thank you.
This is a very, very difficult statewide volunteer position. Thank you. She does deserve a round of applause. And you've done a great job of also reinvigorating a lot of chapters that haven't been around for quite some time. So before we pass the microphone, I'm going to go in reverse order here, because you brought up something very important. Most people get involved in politics, Republicans or Democrats, because of issues. Is that really what drove you to make that call that day?
Absolutely. Life of vulnerable people, the unborn, people with cancer. Yes, that was very important. I'm a certified public accountant, and so also those free market issues and taxes are very important to me as well. And so, yes, it is the issues. It's not so much the job or power or that kind of thing. It's the issues and meeting with people and listening to people.
I forgot you were a CPA. I think we might have to do some talking here when we're done about a candidate for auditor. I think we might have just recruited one. Janet, what got you involved in the first place? Was it issues? Was it a candidate? Was it something in your community? A lot of times local issues will propel someone to get involved.
My background is predominantly IBM. I was a 5-state manager for the telecommunication division up here. And I am very task-oriented in the sense that if you find a problem, you figure out what the solutions are, you get input, and you go. And when I realized how poorly run our election system is, that entire process kicked in. So I wasn't, I'm conservative. I'm probably about as far right as you can go. But what really got to me is, as a key point, if you don't handle the basics, and you don't protect the votes, and you don't get people to show up, it doesn't matter how good you are, it doesn't matter what you know, it doesn't matter your candidate, you're going to lose. And this was a way to put something statewide based on all the private sector experience, and I'm also a retired CPA. So you pull that together, and it actually, at some point in time, the former chair of the RNC actually wanted me to take it on state and nationwide. And the plus is wow, that's really cool. The negative is this is as good as we've got, because I saw umpteen areas for improvement, but I can't do it right now because the RNC is prohibited. But that's what got me in, was actually looking at a basic fundamental right that is with our country, that is a piece of citizenship, and the reason we're founded, and it's sloppy.
Well, let me tell you, was it Joseph Stalin who said it doesn't matter who votes, it matters who counts the votes?
It matters who counts the votes, and that was actually...
And how... Well, we have a wonderful new addition to our panel. This is Senator Carla Nelson from Rochester, Minnesota. And Carla's background is so wonderful because she was in both the House with these fine ladies and now in the state Senate, where she serves with our another august leader who just joined us, Senator David Senjem. I have to recognize him as well. One of the great leaders from Rochester. Carla, we just started talking about what propelled us in the first place to get involved. Was it an issue? Was it a candidate? Was it something in your local community? And you bring a different perspective. Both you and Ann from Greater Minnesota. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, thanks, Annette. Great to be here.
We're glad you're here.
Yes, it was a construction car accident, and one other thing I've forgotten, but anyway, we're glad to be here. Yes, I'm Carla Nelson from Rochester. It's Olmsted County, and my district is Chatfield, Doviota, Stewartville as well. And you know what really got me into politics? You might say I'm kind of an accidental politician. I hadn't really planned on it, but I just got involved in a very local neighborhood issue. It had to do with a park and a road, and through that process I learned things like a planning and zoning committee and a city council and a cow and all these things I didn't know about. And I was so incensed really at what was happening that I ended up knocking on all my neighbors' doors and giving them a flyer and said, we need to get down to City Hall and we need to do this. And it was a year effort, and eventually we got Young Park. And after that, then people just encouraged me to do other things, and I have, and it's been great to be in service, public service.
It's one of the running themes of all of these fine ladies. Rachel, we'll pass the microphone to you, is stepping up to service for your local community, and I think that's such a tribute to all of you, because a lot of people say, not me, I'll stuff envelopes. But when it comes to going door to door and putting your name on the line, I tip my hat to you, because that is a big commitment. Rachel, I know it was 9/11 that propelled you to read the party constitution, but what was the next step then that you took, because you were so concerned about our country?
Yeah, so I read that constitution, actually got involved with an organization many of you are familiar with, College Republicans. And being in Moorhead, Minnesota, so far away from the Twin Cities, 4 hours away, we kind of had to do everything on our own and take care of ourselves. At one point our chair was involved in the statewide executive board, and that helped kind of connect us back with the broader group. But the College Republicans were pretty active at Concordia College, which was nice. Obviously the College Democrats a little bit more active at a 4-year private liberal arts college, but we made our stake there. And that's where I really started to kind of learn what it meant to be a Republican. You know, I got involved because of 9/11, and I thought, we've got to stand up for America, we didn't deserve this. But I couldn't have told you anything about tax policy. I couldn't have told you anything about education policy. It was way over my head. So then with those folks' help and support, we just started getting involved, and I started learning. Being an English major at the time, I loved to read, so I read a lot of our founding documents, a lot of early American writing. That was very influential on me. Yeah, and just kind of took over from there.
Wow.
And I will never run for office. Everyone else can do it, but don't ask me to.
That's right. I think we've heard that sentiment.
So know, Rachel, you will never run for office until you find an issue. And when you find something that you think is unjust and needs your help, you will say, here I am.
Yeah, okay. That's exactly right. I always tell people the most dangerous person in politics is a woman, a list, and a phone, and her kitchen table. Because there's no stopping her. Patty, you were involved in MEPS. Will you talk a little bit about, I want to include you three in that, because this is a training program we have in Minnesota that allows women to learn about politics, running for office, and getting out there and really doing it. And you really did. Tell us a little bit about that procedure.
It was a wonderful program. MEP stands for Minnesota Excellence in Public Service. It's an organization for women. And what they do is they interview and select a group of candidates to go through the program. It's a 9-month program. And every month we would meet on a Saturday all day long, and we would take different topics, topics from local government, congressional government, state, Senate, you know, how a bill is passed and things like that, plus public speaking, plus campaign finance. I mean, it was just a whole bunch of things. And I have to say, at the time I was running and taking the class, and it was very helpful to me because I could use what I learned in the class in my campaign. We have a great group of women. Barb was in the class with me. Jennifer Carnahan was in the class with me. So we've all kind of stuck together and here to serve the Republican Party.
So it's like the good old girls network, huh?
It is, but it is.
I like that. I like that. Do you think it prepared you well for your running in Plymouth?
Oh yes, it helped. It helped immensely with that.
Cindy, did you get involved because of an issue, or was there anything that propelled you to say, you're right, I've got to put my name on the ballot?
For me, it was definitely issues. I didn't even know about MEPS until probably a few years in, but it was an issue that drove me to my first caucus. I didn't even know what a caucus was. I mean, here I am, somebody in 2008, and I was actually working at the time in CD5 off of Penn Avenue in Keith Ellison's district. And in December of that year, prior to the caucus, I started noticing yard signs going up. If you can imagine, in December, signs in people's windows, on the coffee shops, as though it was like Christmas decorations.
What did they say?
Announcing the DFL caucus. Announcing the DFL caucus in February. And I remember thinking, whatever the DFL has going on with a caucus, I better get back to conservative Carver County and figure out what the Republican version of that is. That is what I did not even know it was a caucus. So at the time, my mom and sisters lived in Arizona. My mom still lives in Arizona, in the Phoenix area. She lived 90 miles from the border. And I could hear the palpable fear in her voice about the lack of any control on the border. The safe houses, the coyotes, the trafficking. And this was back then. And I remember thinking, learning about what a caucus was, learning that there was something called a resolution. And so I went to that first caucus so nervous. I was somebody prior to that date who would never say anything in a meeting. I would just think it, but I wouldn't say it. But I went with a resolution in my pocket to build the fence. And so that was that. And then actually when it came time, when all these people called fast forward to running, I was just shocked. I mean, I had never seen myself in surfing before. The thought never crossed my mind.
You were in retail, right? So
I was.
You didn't have did you have any public experience in public speaking or any of these?
Well, no, I hadn't. I had never worked in in the public before. I had a 17-year career as a manager with Dayton's. I was the general manager for the Dayton's downtown St. Paul store for 7 years.
Wow.
And so, the private sector experience has been incredible. As a general manager of a $40 million store, I had 400 employees. You're accountable every single month, not only for extraordinary service, but for the bottom line as well. And government, let me tell you, is quite the departure from that. And so, anyway, that's my experience. And when I ran in 2012, the issue that I went door to door on was that we had a $17 billion with a B dollar unfunded public pension liability, and the incumbent was not at all interested in any reform. And I went door to door talking about how we were on an unsustainable trajectory and that we needed to look for every way possible to honor our obligations, but that we had to change what we were doing. We desperately needed reform, which is still the story today. I mean, we need so much reform on so many issues. So it was with an issue and a passion that I went door to door.
Amazing.
To every door.
That is an amazing story. And you got involved through MEPS as well, is that right? And
I did. I am pretty traditionally conservative, and I always have been. I've got 5 children. I homeschooled my 5 kids. But as I think a typical woman, I did not put myself forward in any way. And I went through the MEPS program in 2010, actually with Pam. We went through the program together. She was running for office at the time and won. I, at the time, was saying, oh, I will never run for office, never. But I did get involved behind the scenes, and I managed a campaign that year, and we happened to win. It was a big win. And stayed involved working on different campaigns and things. But I want to add that Minnesota Excellence in Public Service is such an important program, not because of the nuts and bolts we teach, but because we empower women to do other things. Anyone can learn nuts and bolts. We can learn that. Anyone can teach that. But the reality is we do a ton of personal development in the program. I currently serve on the board. Lisa Bellick actually is in the audience. She's the president of MEPS right now. I'm the vice president. But what we really do is we empower women. And when this opening came up in my district to run for the House, you better believe that I thought, you know what, I know that on average women need to be asked 7 times before they will run for office.
You just took my next question.
Sorry to preempt.
No,
but women need to be asked 7 times to run for office.
Why is that?
Men do not. And the reality is, when that opening came up for me, I said, you know what? I'm not going to be one of those women. I'm going to step up. I'm going to do it. And it's scary, and it's vulnerable, and it's hard, but we can't wait to be asked. We have to step up.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. I'm going to bring that microphone back over here, and I'm going to throw that question right back at you, Carla, because this is one of the hardest things. People always say, why aren't there more women in politics? Why aren't women able to get involved? Why is it that women are behind the scenes but really don't run for office? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, unfortunately, what you've described is the current situation. I, too, was asked to run for the House of Representatives, and I ran and won. Then I was asked to run for the Senate, ran and won, and now I'm being asked to run for another office, and certainly given that great thought as well. But let me just say, there is hope, and there is hope that we will get more women who step up and say, I am here to serve, and I can serve. And MEPS is one way to do that, and you have changed the discussion, and I appreciate that so much. But let me tell you why I say there is hope. As you know, we just had the grand opening of the Capitol. One of the things we had there was an essay contest from students across Minnesota. I'm the chair of the Education Finance Committee. I was the chair of the committee that judged the essays for kids in 1st through 3rd grade. Guess what one little 1st grader wrote? Her name was Hope, and she wrote in pencil on a piece of notebook paper, and she talked about the beautiful Capitol. She'd never been there, but she hoped to get there someday. And she talked about what was happening. And here's what she said, though, at the end, the last paragraph. She said, there's one thing I think could change at the Capitol. I think there should be more women at the Capitol. And then she said, and who knows, we should have a woman governor someday, perhaps me. And that's the culture that we are getting to now. We want young girls to grow up knowing that they are needed in public service, and we can all help change that dynamic.
Thank you for bringing up Little Hope. I hope we don't have to wait that long for Hope to rise to become governor. But let me just say, there's a lot of challenges, Pam. You've run for local office. You've faced the slings and arrows of politics. What do you tell women when they say, you know, Ann brought up something very powerful. It's hard. People are going to disagree with you, and a lot of times we're not good at disagreeing. We want people to like us. What do you tell people when they say, I would run for office, but?
I say it's worthwhile. It's so fulfilling to be able to meet the challenge.
What did you find personally fulfilling when you were in the legislature?
What I love the most, and I just recently thought of an experience that actually Janet was with me at the time when I first door knocked. And when I first ran for office, I went up to this home and I knocked on the door, and a little old lady came to the door and she said, "No one ever comes to visit. No one ever comes to call." And she just pulled me into her home and we chatted and had a wonderful conversation. It was about 10 minutes or so. And she turned to me and she says, "Pam, I'm voting for you." And then she paused and then she said, "What party are you with?" And I said, "I'm a Republican." And then she paused again and she said, "That's okay, I just won't tell my daughter." And I am certain that little old lady voted for me. I mean, we just connected so well. And politics really should be about those connections. Tearing down the labels, really getting at the heart of issues. And I think we as women really can do that well. And there is so much at stake. There is so much at stake. And if there is an issue that just, wakes you up at night, do it. Run for office. You can make such a difference, and I would encourage any of the women. And as president of the Minnesota Federation of Republican Women, we also, as an organization, try to empower and educate and support women in politics. And I'm asked frequently about that. And again, you can do it. Yeah, I never ever imagined doing any of these things, but it's worth it. It's worth it to try. It's worth it to influence others. It's so satisfying to be able to listen to the concerns of constituents and make change happen.
Wow, that's a powerful testimony. Thank you. Janet, was there one moment when you sat there and thought, this issue is so important, I just have to get involved, I have to go do this, I'm going to, because you have a volunteer position that encapsulates a lot of your life. I can say this because my husband used to be the national committee man. It's a lot of money and a lot of time. Tell me how you keep going.
You have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to understand, and this is at my core. And these are some of the presentations that I've started giving around the state. If the United States goes south, the planet's done. I believe that so strongly. And I had the fortune of teaching U.S. history before they started rewriting the textbooks. So I know what the real stuff is, and I know where to find it. And I think we are doing our children, and frankly almost anyone under the age of 40, a very disservice by letting outsiders control what they say we are, ignoring what this country has done. And that is what drives me, because we have so much here, and we have to remember no nation ever brought in so many creeds, so many races, so many ethnicities, so many ways of doing things except this place. We attract the people who say, I don't fit over there. I'm going to go to America. And until recently, that was pretty much who we got, mavericks. I mean, we can all go back in our family and say, why did Susie or John get here? But that's key, because our exceptional government system, we're not exceptional. We have a system that lets us try and fail. And that's a long answer, but that is what drives me. Because I am scared to death that if we lose it, there's not going to be any light in the world. And if you think of flags, and this is my last comment, the American flag is the most recognized flag on the planet. People want to come here. People died to get here, and people died to keep it free, and that's what drives me. So wherever I can do something, I try to do it.
Good for you. What a great testimony. Thank you. Rachel, I'm going to switch it up a little on you, because you're our millennial on the panel, and it's interesting when I hear people like you talk about 9/11 really framed your outlook on your adult life. And tell us a little bit about what issues still matter to you as a result of that, or as a millennial, maybe it's something altogether different.
Sure. I will always say, I wasn't involved in politics. My family wasn't in politics. We were always pro-life. 100%. Life begins at conception. It ends at natural death. That has been a no-brainer for me. That has been one of those issues that I am incredibly passionate about. And it's one of those things where When I talk to candidates, they want to run, and I'm not really sure about the life. I don't. Okay, nice meeting you, for me at least. When I'm making my personal decisions, so that's always been my driving issue, and I think this generation actually is pro-life. I distinctly remember I think it was May of 2009. There was a poll done. I was working for Congresswoman Bachmann at the time. It was one of the first polls since Roe v. Wade that showed that the general public believed life began at conception. And I firmly believe it's because of the technological advances we've made. The fact that, we can see embryos at day 3 of their status and they've got 8 cells. And they know what those 2 sets of cells do. They're not just a lump of cells. One goes into placenta, one goes into the baby. And they have specific functions. And I think this generation is taking life much more seriously. And I don't know if it's maybe a more compassionate generation because of 9/11, if they saw, humanity kind of, America at its worst point, and yet here are all these countries coming to our aid saying we stand with you, because they agreed with Janet that if America falls, the rest of the world is going to go down. And I'm not sure if it's just a more compassionate generation in that way. They might go a little bit too far compassionate on some of the other issues that we have, but I think when it comes to pro-life, they're on our side, and I think we actually can win them over with that message. Same goes for immigrant communities. A lot of immigrant communities are strongly pro-life. Religious communities that, we might disagree on some of the social justice type of themes, but we can agree on being pro-life and supporting families. And for me, being pro-life is life at conception. It also means supporting women and families. We can't just say, okay, don't have an abortion. It means supporting, on some level, some of that early childhood, some of the in-the-home visits, things like that. We don't want you to, be monitored by the government necessarily, but we have to provide the support for that. And we as a community have to step up to these young women who do decide to choose their children, or choose life for their children, and support them. And I think millennials are doing that in droves.
I think that is becoming more and more as we hear about the horrors of what abortion has brought in the world. I'm sure everybody read the article about 2 weeks ago about Iceland has abolished, I love that, abolished or eliminated Down syndrome children. Well, they did it by killing them. And
it's eugenics.
Yeah,
it was absolutely
eugenics. It was one of the most shocking articles I've read in a long time, to think that this is acceptable. And thank goodness it's not acceptable in our country. Thank goodness. Patty, tell me what you heard when you were out campaigning on issues in Plymouth just this last, in 2016, correct? Was there one predominant issue you heard a lot about, and was that what propelled you to run?
I think when I went out campaigning and knocking on doors, I'm in a mixed area, so I was trying to just talk about what we as Republicans believe in and what we felt that we could do if elected to make changes for the state of Minnesota. It was on education, it was on taxes, it was on jobs, it was on the environment. And it was funny, when I started talking about education, and I even had some conversations with teachers, and we talk about things, and we had a conversation. It was great to sit, like I think Pam had mentioned, that all of a sudden you can sit down with people and you forget whose side you're on, and you talk about issues. And I think that went a long ways to just take the labels off and talk about what's happening. And people have the same concerns whether they're Republicans or Democrats, if you frame it in a certain way. And I might digress a little here. Coming from the behind-the-scenes side of this group here, we need to go forth and teach messaging to our people that are out there. So when they meet with their neighbors and they meet with their friends and they're in different committees, that they're talking about these issues and they're getting that dialogue going with people. Because more people out there that are talking, it helps us. Because then you can kind of say, this is what so-and-so really believes in, and this is what so-and-so is going to do if they're elected. So maybe we say, maybe they're a Democrat, but they really like that issue. And sell it on the issues, not the candidate per se, or the party.
Or the party. That's a very powerful message. And I'm going to switch it up for our legislators here. Let's talk a little bit about issues, because y'all have power. You're in the legislature. Tell me what the one issue you wish you could do something about in the 2017, 27, I'll give you even into 2018, because I know y'all be reelected. But tell me what the one issue you care so deeply about, you want to do something about in the next legislative session.
That is really a challenge, because there are so many issues before us. What I was thinking about when we started the line of questioning here, I was thinking about how critical protecting our constitutional rights is. And this has always been important to me as a co-founder of one of the state's original Tea Parties. You know, this is something that we talked about and embraced all of the time. Our Second Amendment rights are under constant attack. Our First Amendment rights, talk about that. If I have one concern right now, it would be the First Amendment and religious freedom, working on that. It would be campus free speech. I'm working on legislation with that, with Senate colleagues as well as the House, you know, to create free speech zones on campus, not to squelch college students from speaking truth, speaking what's on their mind. This is just ridiculous. And so and life, you know, constitutional rights would be my biggest concern, and there's plenty of legislation that we can bring forth to ensure that those protections are there for all of the citizens of Minnesota.
Excellent answer. Yes, indeed. You know, our Constitution is one of the things that the Republican Party does such a fine job of emphasizing, that we have a core group of fundamental documents, nothing more important than our Constitution, and adhering to that and what our founders meant. They meant even defending despicable speech. And that's one of the hardest things I find these days, is to say, you know, I'll defend your right to say it even though I so strongly disagree, but I will defend your right to say it. And that is so important, so thank you. Anne?
So what I discovered, I actually only have served half a term. I was elected in a special election halfway through the session this year. But one thing that struck me, and something I would say maybe more on a principle level as opposed to a specific piece of legislation that I'm interested in working on, is this concept of a return on investment. One thing that I discovered very quickly is, you know, we deal with myriad issues in the legislature, and any one issue probably has 100 different solutions. My question is, when we're looking at these 100 different solutions, which one is going to give us a return on investment to the state? We are investing people's money. This is not just money that comes from nowhere. This is coming out of everyone here, all of our pockets. And are we being good stewards of those resources? You know, I mean, I look at the issue of poverty. I don't think there's a single person here that doesn't think that we have a role to play, an important role to play in making sure that the most vulnerable among us are taken care of. But I think when it comes to dealing with the issues of poverty, we can give people things, or we can teach people how to do things, and which of those is going to bring a return on investment to the state. That's a principle that I would really like to move forward in the legislature.
And make their lives better, because they're able to be self-sufficient and support their families. I'm going to end that round of questions with you, Miss Carla, because you do have a gavel.
Yes, yes. Well, let me just say that really I so appreciate the comments, because really I think as Republicans, certainly I'm really focused on empowering people. And so we should be looking at how do we empower people, not how do we grow programs or enhance or grow government. And to the question, the thing that I heard at the door, that I hear from my constituents, if there's one overwhelming theme, and at first it sounds like a geeky answer, but let me explain. It's not geeky. They are concerned about the size and scope of government, whether it be at the state level or the federal level. And when I talk about the size, we talk about the growth of government spending. We've seen that here in Minnesota in spades in the last 6 years. But let me just say, the federal level doesn't even have to abide by a balanced budget. So now we're looking at a $17 trillion debt. And even though I was a state senator out talking to people on their doorsteps, they are concerned, as am I, that we are truly robbing our children and our grandchildren's future. I was even at a dinner the other night with, there was one other American there. The rest were from another country. And there was a joke about the $17 trillion federal debt. And you know, the joke was, well, we'll just ask the Chinese to bail us out. I will just say that it is that type of growth in government that is so problematic at all levels.
Wow, wow, wow. That is a powerful answer. Let me just throw it open to everyone, whoever wants to jump in on this one, because this is really the core of why we're here. Pretend you're on KGOP, our Republican radio station. What advice would you give to a young woman out there listening today and saying, you know, I'd like to get involved in politics, but I don't even know where to start or what to do? What would you tell her?
Well, I would tell her to join a club of the Minnesota Federation of Republican Women. And if there is no club in her area, I would mentor her to start one. And actually, I am asked that a lot. And on Facebook, I messaged quite frequently. People have been asking, how do I get a Republican group for women started in my area? And it's been really phenomenal, the growth that our organization has had this year. And new clubs and women getting involved. But, you know, it can be very overwhelming. I participated with MEPS as well, and every time I would come home and I'd tell my husband, oh my goodness, I learned so much today and it was wonderful, but take it a step at a time, you know, and grow and get under the wing of another woman who would be willing to mentor you and support you and keep going, just keep going. Every experience growing and learning more.
I'm going to throw another wrench in this question. What if you don't agree with 100% of the Republican platform? What do you tell a young woman? Or a young man, for that matter?
Well, do any of us agree with everything? It's kind of hard. No, identify what really is important to you. What wakes you up at night? What do you cry about? What really do you care about? When you look at your children, what kind of future do you want for them? And if there is something that you can offer, do it. Don't sit back. I want to live my life with no regrets. And if there's an opportunity for me to serve, I want to do it. And I would encourage every woman to do the same.
Good for you. Good for you. Janet, what do you tell? You speak all over the state. What do you tell young women, young men who say, I want to get involved, but boy, this is kind of a complicated procedure. I don't understand this caucus thing. How can they learn?
I've taken both the big positions I've had, the election one and now the national committee, and look at part of the job as networking. So when someone says, how do I get involved, it goes back to some of the comments of the other ladies, and you say, well, what are you interested in, or what's bugging you, how much time do you have, do you know anybody? And then literally, I will take their contact information. And in fact, I just did it yesterday with 2 University of Minnesota students who did not know there was a college Republican issue on campus, and they will be ready this fall. But I've done that at a national level too. So you find out what they want, where they want to go, and you have to, it's like Pam said, when you do door knocking, when you guys do door knocking, you find out what people like and what they want to do. And then if you can link them, and it's not always a party group. Sometimes it's an outside group, but it gives them some place to start. So when they ask me, it's a question, what do you want to do? How do you want to do it? Any ideas? And then usually give a couple options and then find a way to introduce them or to connect them with someone. And I do that a lot.
That's excellent. That's excellent advice. By the way, can we give out a contact information on if women want to get involved in the Federation or how they would get in touch with joining the Federation or with the state party?
The best way to get in contact with the Minnesota Federation is to go to our website, and there is a contact page, and our website is mnfrw.com. That's mnfrw.com. It stands for Minnesota Federation of Republican Women.
Excellent. Thank you. And MNGOP.com?
MNGOP.com, yes, and somebody will pick it up from there. So, or you can corner any of us when we're out in public and say, I want to do something. So I'm sure we'll be glad to help you.
You know, I always tell people, everybody can do something. And when it comes to our democracy, that's what this is all about. And it might be stuffing envelopes, it might be working behind the scenes, or it might be running for office or higher office or something, but we can all do something. Why, and Rachel, I'm going to change it up on you again, why do you do this? What's been your biggest reward since you've been in politics?
Okay, well, I think about that one. I get asked a lot, what do you tell young women in politics? Don't be above any job. Stuff envelopes, put stamps on the envelopes, restock the candy on the parade, do any job, because, and I hire a ton of people, and one thing that I love to see is someone who puts on their resume that they, you know, handed out stickers at a parade, that they counted those rolls of sticker into 100, so it was easier to vote. I will give you credit for that, because there's a lot of just not fun work in politics, but it needs to get done. I say all the time, it's not hard, it just needs to get done, and if you're willing to do it, you will succeed. So then, sorry, your actual question was?
Well, there must be some reward.
Yes.
Tell me what the most rewarding thing you've done.
You know, I got it's really concrete. There's a lot of probably ethereal rewards of seeing differences in people's lives, being involved in the process, getting to know legislators at a personal level. But I think for me, one of the things that I really look back to is when I was working for Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, we were trying to get the St. Croix River Crossing Bridge built. And the congresswoman had worked on that when she was a state senator.
Why was that important?
So it was important because two reasons. One, the Stillwater Lift Bridge, a historic lift bridge, was falling apart and just couldn't handle the traffic. But it was important because it had been trying to get done for probably the better part of 70 years, and the two groups just couldn't come to terms. So Congresswoman Bachmann, as a member of Congress, and I was her outreach staffer in Washington County at the time, we really started spearheading this again, and it started rolling. And there was a conference room in some Department of Transportation building in DC full of boxes of the background on this project. And it finally got passed. And the only unfortunate thing is that the congressman had retired by the time it had passed. She had decided not to run, but it did get done. We had this amazing sort of celebration with our team there, and then just a few weeks ago I got to go to the opening. And because I was working at the Senate, and our transportation committee administrator's office is next door to mine, I overheard that he was planning a tour of the bridge before it opened, so I got to tag along. So I had this project that I've been working on for 5 years for Michelle, and then finally got to go to the top of the pier and see the St. Croix River Valley from one of the top of these piers and go to the opening. And that's the kind of stuff where if you stick with it long enough, you get to physically see. I'm sure everyone here has, especially the representatives and senator, have stories of things you started and it just snowballed and you got to see it get done. But you get that at a staff level too.
I've always told people it can be done. And that's one of the hardest things to get across to people in government is people say, well, that'll never get fixed or that will never get built. It can be done. And you just have to have the will. And I have that little sign from Ronald Reagan's desk on my desk. It always reminds me, we're only as small as we think we are. And when you think about big projects like that, and you realize 70 years people have tried and failed, I will not fail. It gets done. Patty, tell me, there's got to be some reward to being 3rd District Chairman, because it's a heck of a lot of work. As a former District Chairman, I will tip my hat to you. What's your biggest reward so far?
I think my biggest reward so far is having a great executive team that has been willing to go out and partner with every Senate district in the area. And we're trying to help them, develop them, and share with them our knowledge. In teamwork, we want to work smarter. We want to work harder, but we want to do it in a way that's going to be beneficial for everybody and move together as a CD. So when I get people that volunteer, people that show up, I said that's rewarding.
That is rewarding because they're there because they believe what you believe and they want to help somebody. That's really what politics is all about, isn't it? Helping people. And sometimes people can't help themselves. They need government to get out of the way, or they need government to just at least make it possible. And so that's what you're allowing to happen. Cindy, you guys actually can pass legislation. What's been the most rewarding thing that's ever happened to you?
Well, I want to start by saying that as I look around at every single one of these women here, I mean, every one of them have contributed to my success and why I'm here in one way or another, and I continue to be inspired to hear so much of what they've all contributed today. In fact, I know that I served as an election judge and as a poll challenger because of this woman right here. Because she stood up and encouraged people to do that, to step up. And many of us answered the call. And I find it incredibly rewarding to speak to, especially to speak to women, to say, take a look around. Not only consider doing something beyond your comfort zone yourself, but take a look around at others. What do you see in them that they may not see in themselves? And tell them, encourage them. That offers such inspiration. I am not like Anne. I took 14 or 24 or way more times than that for people to say to me, will you run? Then they finally said, no, you have to run. And I still said, no, I don't. And so this was something I never saw in myself. I think we all have the wherewithal to be seeing gifts and talents in those around us and to encourage them to do this. I'm so rewarded by working in collaboration with women like this to serve Minnesotans, not only my own constituents, but the better that I work in collaboration with my colleagues and with anyone within my sphere of influence, the better service I am to Minnesotans.
That is a powerful testimony. And you've only been in the legislature for a short time, so I don't want to force you to answer in 2 months what has been the most rewarding thing. But just in general, in your involvement in Republican Party politics and your service in the legislature, what is that service at all levels brought to you personally? What do you take away at the end of the day? Why you do all this?
Sure. I think, you know, the reality is the rewards are intrinsic, right? I mean, we're not here for awards or anything else. The rewards that we receive are intrinsic. It's that feeling, knowing that we've helped someone who really needed help, that we have been able to, in whatever capacity, move forward an issue that needed attention, whatever it may be. And for me personally, to Cindy's point, for me personally, being involved in Minnesota Excellence in Public Service has been just incredibly rewarding to me. It is my passion to help women find their voice and to choose to step up. And I mean, I look at women like Representative Regina Barr. She went through the program last year, 2 years ago now. And when Regina joined the program, her purpose was, she's a small business owner. She does a lot to promote women in her business. She's phenomenal, incredibly sharp, incredibly bright, just amazing. She joined the program because she just wanted to be able to talk about conservative issues more intelligently in her sphere of influence. And of course, as soon as she joined the program, Lisa and I met her and went, oh no, she's running for office. She's doing something. And sure enough, with much encouragement, she stepped up and ran and won in a district that's been held by a Democrat for a long time. It was an open seat. She won. That is unbelievably rewarding to see women step up and do things that they otherwise would not have done. We have a young woman in the program this year who has said she recently got a new job, and she said she never would have sought after that job, that higher level position, without this program.
Wow.
I'm just a huge proponent. It's what we need to do. We need to do everything we can to promote women.
Amen. Because if we don't, nobody will. And you know what else? We don't have quotas. We don't say, well, 50% of our delegates have to be women. We earn it the old-fashioned way. Quick fire round. Our time is up, if you can believe that. We're going to do a quick fire round all the way across. Tell us your parting advice for a young woman sitting out there thinking about their future, our country's future, our state's future. What do you tell them?
Well, I think the key thing is to get involved. Democracies get the kind of government they deserve. And it's important that all of us be involved, but particularly we need young women to be involved. And let me just say, talking about how to get involved in our previous question, remember, 2018 is an election year. There will be hundreds of campaigns to get involved in. I have over 100 volunteers that work in my campaign, and I have seen them grow in different areas and then go on to serve out in Washington, D.C. and in the state as well. So I would say get involved. That's the first thing. And if you don't know where to get involved, you've got some great ideas right here. But if you need something very locally, you look at your community, you see someone who is running, you see a woman who's running, and you call them up and you say, you know what? I'd like to get involved in your campaign. That happens to me all the time. We go out and have coffee, find out a little bit about them. It's a great thing. Get involved.
I would say,
excellent advice. Sorry.
I would say identify what you care about first, and then just do it. Live life with no regrets.
I would say, and I tell this to my college students too, you can do far more than you think you can do. You can do far more than anybody else puts limits on you. And if you think you want to do something, go for it. and you are allowed to fail in this country and pick yourself up and do it again, and that is unique. So you can do more than you ever thought you could do.
Amen. Amen.
Well, in addition to the no job is too small, don't be afraid of private sector experience. So many people get a major in political science or in history, and they think that that's what's going to get them into politics. And it might help, but honestly, I love it when I see people who, like me, were studying to be an English teacher, and I did switch, but I had a communications degree. But they have different backgrounds. We have committees, we work on legislation that involves science, education, transportation, city planning. All of those areas, we need more conservatives in those areas. And so get your degree there and then come work at the legislature or for a member of Congress and help them in that area.
I was just talking to somebody this past week. We're going to win the governor's race in 2018. I'm not going to say who's going to do it, but a Republican, somebody with an R behind their name. And there you go. And when this happens, we need 650 people committed to our cause to go and work in that administration. That is a mighty endeavor. And that is something worthy of everybody here, everybody at the fair to think about. How do we want to change our state? Penny, what do you tell people when they call and say, I think I'd like to get involved? What do you tell them?
I would say I'd like to meet you. I'd like to sit down and talk to you or spend some time on the phone and encourage them to get involved. And I think if you've got someone there that's kind of tentative about doing it, you've got to nurture them a bit and maybe check back in with them or hook them up with someone, like Jen had mentioned some of the other opportunities in the party. But you've got to work with them and help develop them, because people come in and they'll do something, and if you just ignore that volunteer, they're not going to come back. And I'm speaking from the volunteer side, but a lot of the volunteers turn into workers in the industry, the government industry, and also run for office. So encourage them, nurture them, and support them.
And I know that you got your start because you're a self-starter, you're an entrepreneur that felt a calling in 2010 with the Tea Party. What do you tell other folks who say, I am so troubled by X, Y, and Z? How do you channel that energy?
Well, what I would offer for advice is that things happen when people show up. I'm thinking about my experience in 2008. I didn't know what a caucus was. I found out where my caucus was, that there was in fact something called a caucus in Chanhassen, and I showed up. And I ran for delegate, and then I went on to the convention, our county convention, and I won seats to the state convention that year, the congressional and the state convention. It was my first caucus. And so things happen for people who show up and involve yourself. I brought that resolution in my pocket, and when it passed 100% in my little kindergarten room that we were sitting there, and everybody clapped, I ended up volunteering for the resolution committee. So I was there hearing about all the other resolutions that were going to be going forward or needed to be tweaked. So anyway, it's just been wonderful with all the experiences. The more the merrier.
Wow, that is a powerful story. Ann, we'll end it with you. I'm going to ask everybody if you have any questions, you want to talk to elected officials, you want to find out how you can be an elected official, you want to find out about the MEPS program, how you can get involved. We'll all be around here and happy to talk to you about your future in the Republican Party of Minnesota. But Ann, we'll let you have the final word. What has been the most fulfilling thing? What advice do you give to people when they say, I'd like to get involved? What's your final thought?
I want to take on this advice question specifically for young women. I happen to be someone who does believe that there are fundamental differences between men and women, and we function differently, we think a little differently, and I think that's okay. And what I would say to young women is embrace that. Don't enter the world of politics trying to figure out how you can enter a man's world by behaving more like a man. I would say that every young woman, and frankly every woman, we need to enter this sphere owning who we are and using who we are to further our principles, to further our goals. Who's seen Wonder Woman? There is the most phenomenal example of feminism, because I think that we should all identify as feminists. There's the most wonderful example of feminism in Wonder Woman, and it's when she's walking through this field deflecting all these bullets, and the reality is she was brave, she was strong, she was fierce, she was powerful, and she was all of those things not because of how she could be like a man, but she was all of those things because of how she felt so deeply about, she had such compassion for these people that she was trying to save. And yes, I'm bringing superheroes into this, but that's just it. We can all be strong, fierce, powerful, brave, not because of how we can be like men, but because we can channel those unique attributes we have as women to move forward those things we need to do.
Wow, wow. It's hard for me to stop there, but I am going to say not all our heroes wear capes. Some of them just run for office and have the bravery and, frankly, the personal conviction to get out there and do what needs to be done. And I like to think that's what Republican women bring to the table. We look at a problem and say, we're going to go out there and fix what needs to be done. Thank all of you so very much, not only for being here today, but for your service. This really makes a difference in our country and in our world and in our state and our local communities. So thank you. Keep doing what you're doing times 100, and hopefully we'll get some reinforcements for you in time for the next election. And thank you all for coming today. Thank you so much.
All the women that came today, many of them braved traffic to get here. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much to Annette, who just got back from a long trip and made it here today with her husband Jack. She's been a mentor to many of us, and we so appreciate you. Thank you, one and all. Thanks.